G'day everyone. Thought I'd talk to you about a really interesting article that I've just read from EOSHD. Now this is a Canon user site obviously, and really they're giving the EOS R a slamming if you're talking about from the video aspect of this camera. Now if you're dealing from a still photography and you don't do any video, well this obviously isn't really going to be of any issue with you, but I thought I'd talk to you about it because I'd love to know your opinion about what you think about this, and then I'll sort of talk about it, how I compare it to say what I'm using with Sony and things like that. But let's look at the article itself. So it's EOS HD, and I will put the link down below that you can have a look at. But the actual heading of this is dishonest, misleading, unnecessary, EOS R and the crop 4K. And the amazing thing is that if you look at this first pic here, they're actually showing the crop that you're actually getting out of this camera. And they're saying basically it's a 1.8 crop. And that's a massive crop taken out of that sensor. So if you're looking at the green area here is your actual sensor, which is your full frame sensor. So in this camera, you're only getting that much of your 4K footage or your sensor being used for the full 4K. And if you're dealing with that, say from the Sony, where it's using the full sensor, it's a massive difference. Now, the reason why that counts is because you're losing basically your complete wide end of your lenses that you purchase. And it's actually interesting down here that they're saying that it's official in 4K. There's a 1.8 crop on the Canon EOS R. So the new 28-70 f2, which is their lens that they're touting, and that is just an incredible lens, basically turns into a 50 to 126 millimeter equivalent 3.6 lens. So you're paying $3,000 on that to get that lens if you're using it on this camera, and it just doesn't make sense. And I can't understand why Canon have done that when you're dealing with such expensive lenses. The second you're putting it onto this body, that you're getting a massive crop when you're dealing with the 4K. Now let's scroll down just to sort of keep discussing this, because it's interesting to see what they're actually saying. Basically, they're saying that the EOS R for Revolution apparently is Canon's most exciting and relevant camera release for a decade. This is what they were saying. Passions are running high, I understand why. This is the modern camera system everyone waited for 5 years for. But they're basically saying that it's a 1.8 crop in 4K is literally a deal breaker for me. Nobody wanted this. And this is the interesting thing. It's interesting when you say that they compare it down here, I think, to the Nikon. It says, I can assure you, buying a full frame camera to shoot nearly 2 times crop appeals to nobody. You can spend the same on a Nikon Z6 or the Sony A7 III and wait to see what Panasonic will also have to offer. And they're also saying how it's got pathetic slow motion too, that it's only 720p that you have to go down to if you want to get 120 in your slow motion as well. And basically they're saying that they really should sack the person responsible for this camera. So it's a pretty harsh review. It's also saying R stands for reverse gear. They're talking now about the actual Kodaks, which you can read as well. I'm not going to go all through this, but I'll leave the link down below. But it's saying how the Kodak is actually not even better than the 5D Mark IV. But yeah, it's pretty damning. They're saying also down here that paying $3,000 for an effective 50 to 126 millimeter 3.6 is ridiculous. They're saying that you're basically being forced into buying EFS lenses instead, because if you look at it, if you wanted to shoot something wide, well then you'd have to get something like a 10 to 18 EFS lens to give you that almost sort of decent wide angle lens, which really is a disappointment. Again, if we look back here, they're saying down here, they're showing that, so for a 1080p, we have a 1.6 crop like a Rebel, a 2010 Rebel. In 4K, we don't even get the privilege of a 1.6 crop. We're getting a 1.8 crop. Which is just terrible. And obviously then you're losing your depth of field, and this is showing the crop basic factor that you're getting. So you're losing sort of this large full frame area and coming down to this tiny little area in here for your crop, which really is awful. And when you think that the camera has an articulating screen like what you're looking at here, which will be beautiful for doing this videography, they've crippled it that regards as well. They're saying down here that the prices, you know, it's ridiculous when you think that you're paying for this lens, which is the 28 to 70, you're paying $3,000. The body itself is $2,300. That it's ridiculous you're paying for that high-end lens mount and you can't even use that lens if you're talking about video. What else is it saying? There's no axis, so no 5-axis stabilization on it at all, and it's got that dreadfully slow-mo capabilities. They're saying that even cameras from the beginning of 2014, which was the NX1, have given you better slow motion, which again is showing how crippled it is, and it's saying it doesn't match Sony, Nikon, and Panasonic, which is also bad. Like I said, there's a big discussion there on bit rates that you can have a read of. Let me know down below, but they're saying the bit rates are actually worse than the 5D Mark IV. And then they're also talking about the bad reviews from the videographers out there, people who shoot video, like Philip Bloom is saying that's not a revolution at all. They're saying basically it specs from 3 years ago. Jordan Drake says there's a huge 4K crop and heavy rolling shutter as well. What else have we got? DP Reviews said, also Jordan says they're not opening up the mount to other third parties, so that's another issue for cheaper lenses. And DP Reviews said basically about the 1.8 crop, you know, how bad that is as well. And it does suffer from significant rolling shutter. So I really would like to have your thoughts on this, particularly, like I said, the Canon users. Obviously others can chime in as well. But it is really disappointing when you look at what they've done and how they've crippled the camera. Clearly they are protecting their video cameras, which is very disappointing, particularly for you Canon users when you look at, say, what Fuji have just announced particularly. And it's going to be interesting to see what Panasonic have to announce. And the video options, even in the Nikon, are better as well. So they really have crippled this camera. Now, if you're a still shooter, like I said, this doesn't matter to you. But if you are from videography, they really have let your users down. So I'd love to know what your thoughts are on that. And I'll see you all again soon for the next video. Bye for now.